in, he's out, he's in again, he's out again, he's definitely going, no, he's actually staying, who knows. Jaap Stam, as far as we know, as we record this happening now, is still Reading manager. Welcome to the Tilehurst End Podcast, episode 152. I am Marc Mayo, your host as normal, and joining me to discuss the manager that we think is still our manager, at least when you listen to this, should still be the manager, not because we necessarily want him to, but because it just makes this podcasting thing a whole lot easier when you know exactly who the manager of the football club is while you're talking about it. But it's Simeon Pickup, aka BucksRoyal, editor of the TilehurstEnd.com. How's it going, Sim?
I am very well, and yourself?
I am not too bad. I actually didn't go to the Reading game against Millwall on Saturday. I went to the Wolves versus Sheffield United as a sort of meeting up with a friend, going to a ground we've never been to before, and actually rediscovered what a jubilation was at football. So I've sort of missed out the languidness of losing 2-0 at home to Millwall, but no doubt we'll be talking about that. And, well, let's jump into that then with the recap.
View from the Tilehurst End, recapping this week's championship action.
Well, we talk about the Millwall game and how we failed miserably to build on a win, but of course, before we get onto that, we did have a nice win away at Burton just to ease those relegation fears. It was a 3-1 victory. John Daddy Bodvarsson getting on the score sheet twice with Chris Gunter scoring. If you can bring your mind back to that midweek victory then, Sim, it was a 4-4-2 system, a little bit different. This seemed to fix all our worries at the time it happened, didn't it?
Yeah, it just seemed a completely opposite performance, completely opposite night to what we've had over the last couple of months, really. It was almost a hark back to maybe the Derby away game or the Forest game at home, where we got the first goal, seemed to take the initiative, have a bit of confidence. And when we do things like that, we're actually very capable of getting a good result, a good performance, and putting in a few goals. Delighted for John Daddy Bodvarsson, who didn't have to be too far out to get his brace. But still, it's about getting in those right positions, and he managed to do that. He had that killer instinct against Burton, that kind of instinct that we've lacked from strikers ever since Kermorgant was on form last season, to be honest. And a fantastic goal from Chris Gunter, of all people, as well, from the edge of the box. And great to see him running over to someone who may or may not be our manager over the next couple of days to celebrate his goal.
That was quite interesting, wasn't it, how he ran to Jaap Stam, and I think the fact that it was a training ground move, it's so clearly worked on before the game, and we haven't really had many of those goals this season where it's quite evidently a training ground move that shows the ideas of the management coming off, really, and actually getting a goal for the team. And the whole Jaap Stam thing, Gunter, I mean, he's never gonna. It's nice, as you say, that he's gone over to the manager. He's never going to score a goal and then flip off the manager. That's not something that generally happens on a football pitch. But then afterwards, we go to the Millwall game at home on Saturday. Millwall, they are such an annoying team to play in so many respects. Everyone knows about the history of the club and everything, but they are very much a Millwall version of Millwall at the moment. There's no doubt about that. And, I mean, where did it all go wrong? Do you think that from Burton to Millwall, was there a formation sort of shift or something? Let's talk about Bodvarsson playing on the right flank and that not really helping him. Where do you think the Burton game flowed into the Millwall game and just went so badly for us?
I don't think for the Burton game we had to be particularly too inventive tactically. We just had to just be confident, really, and get forward and have a bit of energy and really get our tail up and go at them. And the team that we put out against Burton, I thought, was fine, with the two up top, with some pacey wingers out wide with Aluko and Boro. But I just think we got it wrong tactically against Millwall. I think the Millwall manager Neil Harris said after the game that they knew exactly what to expect from Reading, that we were just going to keep the ball and try and play as we always do, to be honest. And we didn't change those expectations at all. There was no pace in the team. There was not enough movement at all, and it was just two-dimensional. And there wasn't enough creativity. Dave Edwards and Joey Vandenberg are both good, experienced, disciplined players on their own. But if you want to play a creative, mobile, intricate style of football, particularly at home, you need players with movement, players with a good range of passing, people like Kelly, Swift if he wasn't injured, maybe even Clement if you're looking at that kind of player. And also the Luco not being in the side, only having that one quick winger with Barrow, it just felt a bit too one-sided, having to rely on Barrow too much. And in the end, it was only him that was offering anything in an attacking sense. At the start of the second half in particular, when he went on some mazy Jimmy Kebe-esque runs that almost seemed to get us in with a chance of scoring that goal. But even then, despite all of that, I just felt it was about the first goal. If Reading managed to sneak the ball over the line at the beginning of the second half, which they almost managed, then it could have been a very different game. But obviously the confidence isn't there, and when you don't have that, it's so tough to impose yourself on a game, and Reading just aren't doing that at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Mo Barrow, because he's stormed home with the man of the match poll on the Tilehurst End.com. It was up against John Daly Wavas and Vito Manoni. 81% of fans voting for Mo Barrow, which is pretty strong. We've also 11% said other, so there was 11% that weren't even happy. Just to name some of the votes that people typed in as other: Jake Cooper, Tim Della, nobody. You get a good sense of what's happening in the game when those are the votes for the man of the match. No disrespect to Tim Della, of course, but Jan Kermigan is such a I want to talk about Jan Kermigan purely because Tyler Blackett got so much hate in this game, and as I say, I wasn't there, so I can't say that I found his performance particularly good or bad. I've heard it was bad. That's just how it goes with some of these players. Tyler Blackett, we know what his limitations are. We know how good he is as a footballer. We know, for example, that if we were to get promoted, he wouldn't come with us. But if we were to stay in the Championship, he's a good squad player, and he has good games and bad games. But Tyler Blackett got a lot of hate for this game. And I want to ask you, compared to Jan Kermigan, who is someone who has had very, very little impact on the team in a goal-scoring sense, as a striker who, the fitness issues and everything surely have to be out the way now. It's February, for God's sake. Why isn't Jan Kermigan getting any kind of stick from the fans? Why is he still in the team? And if you want to talk about Blackett as well, but what is up with Kermigan at the moment?
I think fans, to be honest, make up their minds about a player before they even arrive at the club in the first place. When we got Jan Kermigan, we knew he's, despite being a limited player, I guess, being quite old when he arrived, we all knew that he was a fan favourite from Charlton and Bournemouth, and he's a popular guy. And eventually he had a very good season last year, and obviously proved how good he is. And I just feel that he can still kind of take from that. He can still live off that. So it's being harsh, but he's probably perhaps just living off that a little bit in terms of his popularity with the fans. Tyler Blackett, on the other hand, came to the club with a reputation of, not being very good, to put it mildly, from his time at Man United and a few other clubs. And whatever he does, I'm not saying he's been amazing or been particularly good at his time at Reading, but if he has a good game, if he has anything to be really positive about in his own mind, that doesn't really get played up and given an opportunity to be built on by the fans. But then when he does have a really bad game, or even just a poor game, kind of like a 4 out of 10, there are so many fans that are just going to leap on it, and it's unnecessarily become a huge talking point. The performance that he gave on Saturday, sure, it wasn't a great performance, but the fans are talking about it so much, and they're playing up how bad he was so much that you wonder what kind of effect it's going to have on him in terms of his positivity and his self-belief, which must be pretty much rock bottom now, especially with Jaap Stam dragging him off, having already brought him on in the game.
Yeah, it's hard with Blackett, because I think the problem is with the club at the moment is you have, players are human, they know exactly what's going on, they're on, a lot of them on Twitter, that even if you're not on Twitter, you still go on to BBC Sport and whatnot, and you'll see the stories about Stam not doing very well, the stories about Reading not doing very well. And I think if you're a player like Tyler Blackett, you look to your manager to give you confidence. But Jaap Stam his authority has been diminished by this bad run we're on, and therefore he can't award that confidence. He can't say anything, as far as I can see, that would give that confidence back. And it really seems like the team in general just has a complete dearth of confidence. Case in point, the fact that we go 1-0 down with it's a silly opener. How many times have we conceded this sort of goal this season? Goes in off of Leandro Bacuna as he turns his back to a cross, completely dumbfounds Vito Mannone, as one would expect it would. The second goal only goes in because the first one does, because of the nature of the game. And yet all of that, we've still takes to the 93rd minute to have a shot on target. Sadly, it was just the case, the same old. You can copy and paste that sort of match report for a lot of the games we've had this season, be it Middlesbrough or Birmingham. There's so many of them going. Let's talk Stam then. It seemed, rather, on Sunday night to be reaching a bit of a head. It seemed Daily Mail were reporting that he was off. The Dutch media perhaps have more reliable contacts to the man himself. They've said that it's not going to be the case. He's not going anywhere, or certainly at the moment. The idea of him going to Leeds has been thrown out the window. He's not going to Leeds, according to pretty much anyone you listen to. Forget what you think about whether you want him to go. Do you actually think he will go this week?
Hard to tell, really. I'm always wary about these kind of media reports that come out in very quick succession to each other. I think it was HITC that first reported it, that Jaap Stam was on the brink of going. And then you'll have a few other reports that come out all saying pretty much the same thing without explicitly naming that original piece is what they're talking about, but they're all kind of echoing it and snowballing it and not really adding anything else. And so it seems more likely that he's about to go because all these articles, all these reports are coming out. But in reality, I think they're all just talking about the same room and the same report. And it doesn't necessarily make it any more likely that he's about to go.
I think it's a good thing you mentioned there, because if a new report was to come out and say Stam is going and he will be replaced by, that is new information, and we've learned something new, and that obviously has an extra piece of a source or whatever that has told us something that we didn't know. But I think you're right then. When you say about the Daily Mail report, it just says that he's off, then we don't actually know. That's not actually any more information than we sort of knew beforehand.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Daily Mail article said more about the Tyler Blackett incident than it did about the Jaap Stam speculation. It's interesting that they all just have maybe a sentence or two saying Jaap Stam might be sacked. But they, as you say, they won't go into any detail about what the club are thinking, what Jaap Stam is thinking, or anything like that. There's a lot of media outlets that are all trying to, I think, just kind of keep in touch with it, so that if he does get sacked, they can say, well, we reported on it. I'm not having a go, but that just seems to be the way of how things go at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's not a bad state of mind to be in, certainly, with a lot of these things. When it is at this stage, I mean, my 2 pence, I don't think they will sack him. I spoke to Handbags last week and they said if it does go all bad against Burton and Millwall, even then, I said I just don't necessarily think it's going to happen. And the problem is, it's so hard to gauge with championship clubs these days. Forget what we knew about when McDermott got sacked, when Coppell left, etc., etc. It's completely different people in charge at the club at the moment. Ron Gourlay has never sacked a Reading manager because he only arrived in the summer. Teverden has never been involved in sacking a manager. The Chinese owners have never been involved in sacking a manager. We simply don't have any precedent to rely on. And if you talk about where we are in the table, we've been in this position for like 4 months now, so that hasn't changed at all. We're not necessarily any closer to the relegation zone because we pick up the odd point regardless of our form. The games coming up, I mean, we've got Middlesbrough away on Saturday. No one in the right mind is going to say that is a do or die game. So we find ourselves trying to predict whether he's going to go or not, and it's just absolutely impossible. Take Leeds, they sacked their manager on Sunday night. Like, we wouldn't have been at all ready for a Stam sacking on Sunday night, regardless of the circumstances. So it really is just a case of having to wait and see. We go to Boro on Saturday afternoon. We'll talk about that in Any Other Business. And really, I mean, is there anything else you want to add on Stam? Because it's just it does feel like we have spoken about this so many times, and it still feels like we're not actually getting anywhere with it.
Yeah, what's fascinating for me is that Stam just almost seems immune to all the speculation that's going on. It's probably just pure stubbornness and self-confidence, not in a bad way, but a lot of other managers would have been almost broken by all this speculation, and I think it says a lot about his character, whether you like him or not, that he's carried on, he's confident. He certainly seems to feel that he's gonna stay. Obviously, he might think differently in private, but the impression that he's giving out is, I think, very strong, very resolute. So it's good to see him standing up to it.
Yeah, he certainly knows how to stand up himself on the pitch and in the dugout. And we will always be on top of this on the tilehurstend.com. Always keep an eye on the social media. We will be the first to react if he does go and any potential replacements coming in. But here we sit on Monday night. He's not going anywhere. There's no reports of being imminent. So if you listen to this on Tuesday morning, it's a surprise to us as much as it is to anyone. And we'll move on to Newsbites now, because there is in fact a new manager in town at Reading at the academy.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.
Sim, be honest then, had you heard of the word Ged Roddy in any sense of your life, or in Ged then Roddy, Roddy then Ged, any sense of hearing those words before Monday afternoon when Ged Roddy, MBE no less, became the new academy manager of Reading Football Club?
I had absolutely no idea that Ged was a first name, to be honest. I thought it was...
Is it short for something? Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know. Gedwood? That's
Gedrick something? I have no idea. Gedwood, perhaps.
So he's the new academy manager. He's of an interesting ilk, shall we say. He's got his past in tennis and a general sort of UK sport background. He helped introduce the current English academy system, EPPP, as it's known. What was your initial reaction to this man and what you've learned about him getting the job?
I think the initial thing that really jumped out at me was that he has a very different background to the kind of people that we've been appointing. If you look at what he's done recently, he seems to have been more behind the scenes at the Premier League rather than being out on the front lines, as it were, doing the coaching, getting involved with the players. But as I started to read up about him a bit more, it appears he does have some good experience in coaching. I think he was at Team Bath FC, which used to be a professional side that worked alongside the university to kind of give young people experience both academically and on the football pitch. So it was interesting to see him set that up, and he was out there managing it, coaching the players. So he's certainly got some first-hand senior experience when it comes to managing footballers. But looking at his more recent experience, it's interesting to see that Reading are going for, it almost seems like they're appointing more of an academic football mind rather than someone who's kind of like a man motivator, that kind of person who's going to drive on players. Personally, he seems to be a very deep thinker, very intelligent man when it comes to how football is run, and you don't get into a position like director of youth setup, I think it is, at the Premier League without being someone who knows his stuff about youth development. And as you say, working with the EPP system certainly shows that he's got a lot of knowledge with that. And also in his acknowledgement in the official announcement that he'd been appointed, it was good to see him make some very nice comments about the late Eamon Dolan, to say that he's going to carry on his legacy, which is always what we like to hear.
Absolutely, and it was interesting, I thought, when you look down his sort of job CV route, and I think as someone who can kind of game the system, as someone who knows exactly the intricacies of the academy system, it works very well to have someone who knows that. The particularly interesting thing I think about this one is how a lot of clubs would look to, another club. Let's just pull a random team out of the mind. Let's say Birmingham had a great academy. Oh, well, let's go and get Birmingham's academy man, put him in Reading, and he'll just do the same that he did at Birmingham if Birmingham had a particularly good academy. Reading haven't done that, and I think that's a smart move, because it's sort of too often in football you think that one man can do a great job somewhere, just put him in a different, move him 30 miles away or 200 miles away, and he'll do exactly the same thing at a different club. That's not what Reading have done. I think that works well with the academy, because you need someone. It is so unique, the academy set up, because you have the sort of youth coaching from ages 6 and above, you have the particular area and the catchment area that it's in. You need someone who knows all about these things and makes that particular to Reading. So effectively what the club have done, I think, is get Roddy in as someone who has all of the intelligence, all of the tools available to him. He can now get fully involved in the Reading Academy way of doing things, and the catchment area, the kids that we have opportunities to, the clubs that we're rivals with for young players, and hopefully he can get fully in tune with that. And what he's told the club website as he was appointed, he said, I quote here, "Throughout my career I've worked very closely with the late Eamon Dolan, and the legacy he created at this club and within its esteemed academy remains at the heart of this club's youth development programme." So, I mean, it's a good sign in a large sense that the club is still thinking about the academy. We never thought they were really throwing it away, but with new deals for Tenai Watson and Sam Smith to follow that of Omar Richards, there is a sense that the club have just reminded the fans in a way, and particularly with Watson and Smith and Richards as well to an extent, not really being a part of the team, that the academy is still important.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about the owners as well, to be honest. We barely hear anything from them directly. I don't think we've had a statement from Dai Yong Gay since he bought the club, to be honest. So you have to judge what they're actually going out and doing, what their actions are. And in doing things like giving new deals to Sam Smith, Omar Richards, Tenai Watson, bringing in Roddy as well. Scott Marshall, I think, came in under the Chinese owners. Ron Gourlay too. It's a very interesting mix of things that they're doing behind the scenes, and I think it actually looks quite ambitious. Bringing in Ron Gourlay, who's worked for Man United and Chelsea. Bring in Roddy, who's done a lot for the Premier League. They're assembling a very experienced, intelligent, diverse team behind the scenes, and of course giving out those contracts to new players as well shows that they have a lot of faith in the youth system, I think, and it also shows that they're planning on looking to the long term with the club, and perhaps that kind of also feeds into why they haven't sacked Jaap Stam yet, that they want that bit of continuity, they want that stability for the long term.
Or that they're spending all of their money on new contracts and employing new people. all of the Jaap Stam sacked fund has been drained dry. This is what we have to pay for. If we want to see our man go, we have to focus on one or the other in the Championship. Sadly, can't do both. Let's quickly run through how it has been going at the other teams of Reading FC. And speaking of the academy, Jack Nolan, who's part of the under-18s team, has been called up to the England under-17 squad for their few sort of friendlies in the spring. They'll be going. I think there's a tournament in the summer which they'll be focused on. Hopefully, we'll be going out to that. The under-18s team on Tuesday night go to Colchester away in Colchester's main stadium. They did lose 4-0 to Fulham on the weekend, but then who knows? Maybe they were holding people back for the FA Youth Cup tie on Tuesday night, so keep an eye out for that. Under-23s lost to Norwich on the weekend. They're third in a very tight promotion battle in the second division of the Premier League under-23s division, but they've only won 1 in 5 at the moment, so hopefully they can turn that around in due course. And the women's team, sadly, it was a bit of a triple or even quadruple whammy on the weekend because they lost 1-0 at home to Birmingham in the FA Cup, so they're out of that for another season, sadly losing 1-0. And they are going to Everton on Sunday. They're away to the struggling Toffees, who, you know, it'd be a good win that if they can get 3 points or draw there, just to really ease themselves away from any survival issues, because Everton certainly do have those themselves. And well, I think that's it for the Newsbites. Then we'll be moving on to your questions in the mailbag after this.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
Read the blog
on thetilehurstend.com.
You know, Sim, it's actually very quiet on the mailbag front at the moment. I think everyone's holding back until Jaap Stam goes, or I don't know, signs a new contract or something, just to unleash. But we have a couple of questions for the mailbag that we'll go through this week, and we'll start with George, who says, "Do you think that we will go down if Stam stays in charge?"
Honestly, I can't quite see it, to be honest. Obviously, things aren't going particularly well. We've only got one win in about 10 games in the league, something like that, and the form is dire. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I still think that Jaap Stam just has enough to get us a few more wins, like the Burton game, to just keep our heads floating above the water. I look at the other teams that are struggling at the bottom as well, and I don't see enough teams really kind of breaking out that bottom 3, 4, 5, 6 teams to threaten our survival hopes, to be honest. Burton, I think, are gone. Sunderland are a bit of a mess despite appointing Chris Coleman as well. Hull seem in a bit of a bad shape as well, despite the impressive appointment of Nigel Adkins. Birmingham are a mess, as they always seem to be nowadays. And with all of that being considered, despite how bad we are, I think we'll just be enough to stay up, and other teams will probably be just a slight bit worse.
I think that's always the key thing in the Championship. There's 24 teams, so making sure that there are 3 who are worse than you isn't always that difficult. And I mean, we've only won 8 games this season, but Hull and Sunderland have only won 5 in 30 games. And if you're going down instead of teams like that, then I mean, that is really disastrous. And I agree with you. I think Stam has it in him just to pick up enough points. There's still, 16 games left? I think 16 more points to put us on 48. That will keep us up. And that's only like 4 wins and 4 draws in 16 games. It's not very impressive, but it would do the trick. So, me and Handbag spoke at length about the relegation battle last week, and I do think that Burton still have a good chance. Sunderland, I mean, they just look so bad at the moment. Hull even worse to some extent, certainly on their recent form. Barnsley are about to lose their manager. Bolton, sort of very unpredictable in a sense. We do actually, I'm just looking ahead to the fixtures that we have coming up. We play Bolton at home. We've got Sunderland at home. These are might actually turn out to be really key games. We've still got to go to Forest. We've got QPR at home if you consider them contenders. And, I mean, otherwise, that's kind of it. We played a lot of the relegation teams, Birmingham, Burton twice now. So the big 6-point relegation games are kind of thinning out now. So interesting to keep an eye on, but I think we're both in agreement that Reading going down under Stam, it would take it getting even worse, and it's actually pretty bad at the moment, so I'm not sure if we're capable of it getting even worse still. Johnny Hunt, who writes a regular column for the Tilehurst End, has sent us a question saying, what are your thoughts on the new academy leader? We have pretty much covered that. I would actually quickly add that Johnny Hunt is doing his walk to Fulham in aid of Calm, the suicide prevention charity. So if anyone who is hopefully going to be donating a few pounds for that, we'll be promoting that on the site as and when the walk and whatnot comes closer. You can always find Johnny on Twitter as well. And as I say, there's a very thin mailbag this week, so we are going to hop straight on down to any other business and talk about Saturday's game away to Middlesbrough.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
Any other business?
Sim, in the last 7 games against Middlesbrough, since basically we've been relegated from the Premier League in 2012, 2013, Reading have won 3, Middlesbrough have won 3, and we have drawn 1. So this is a game really without any historical precedent. We've won there, we've lost there, they've come here and won, they've come here and lost. Middlesbrough are a team that we don't, there's no real indicator as to how we're going to do.
Yeah, and they've had a pretty odd season as well. A bit like us, they appointed a very talented manager, I think, in Gary Monk in the summer. It's good that they were able to prize him away from Leeds United, and it looked like he was going to be able to build a good side for the future. Brought in some very expensive players, people like Britta Sombolonga, Martin Braithwaite, and it looked like they just needed to gel, and as long as they did, they'd be in the top 6, even going for automatic promotion, but it doesn't seem to have happened for them as they would have liked. Hence Gary Monk getting the sack earlier in the season. So it's impossible to predict it, really. There's not much of a sense, I think, really, that either side is going to be able to know what they're about going into the game. They both might be pretty cautious, anxious to not get beaten. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of game we get.
Yeah, the thing is with Middlesbrough is that you look at their goal record and it is all Britta Sombolonga. It's him or bust, basically. He's their top scorer with 12 goals for the season, and yet he's only scored once in his last 13 games. So it's a team that's really struggling in a large sense to, I suppose it's an identity thing as well. With Pulis in charge, it takes a little bit of time for that sort of mentality and the structure that he demands to get into place. They've got the third best home defensive record in the division. They've only got 2 league wins in 2018, both of which were away from home, and they are now 3 games without a goal. So, what would you say about Pulis versus Stam in terms of tactical battle? Because they are theoretically going to sit back on the break and then, maybe try and catch us out with a couple of pacey wingers and whatnot. Do you think that's actually how they'll come out in this? Because I'm not sure that the Middlesbrough fans would really settle for that.
I can't see it happening, to be honest. Despite them being a team with a notoriously defensive manager, I don't think this is the kind of game where they're going to sit back and invite us onto them, to be honest. If Pulis watches what Reading have been like in the last couple of away games, I'm sure he'll expect us to be going to Middlesbrough to try to be hard to beat, to probably change things up tactically. He'll probably look at the Burton game and expect us to probably come out in a 4-4-2, something like that. So with that in mind, I would have thought that Middlesbrough will themselves try and come on to us and really try and get the most out of people like Assombalonga and put on a show for their fans. Because as you say, they haven't really been scoring very much in the last couple of games. They're struggling for wins this year as well, so this is their ideal opportunity to get forward and get that first impressive win under Pulis, or at least one of the first under Pulis.
I think the thing is, when it comes to Boro's fans, it's very difficult to imagine those fans settling down and saying, you know what, Reading, who are 18th, they're going to come here and we can sit back and invite them onto us. I think it's very difficult to imagine that they'll sort of settle for that. And Boro, there must be so much pressure on them at the moment because the season is ticking on. They are not quite in the promotion picture. They're 6 points away from the playoffs, which is, there's a big gap forming now between the playoff teams and those trailing them. And Middlesbrough, one of those teams who simply have to take the impetus at some point. And they've always been a good defensive team, Boro, whether it's Karanka in charge or Pulis at the moment. They've still got a decent defence. And that's why it is a hard one to predict. They've signed Mo Besic from Everton, a young forward by the name of Harrison from City, and Martin Crady from Huddersfield, all on deadline day. So there is quite obviously a sense in Middlesbrough at the moment that all is not well, all is not perfect. They need some reinforcements. These players are going to theoretically have to take a bit of time to get into the way of things at Boro. Where do you predict this one's going to lie? It is. I know we've just spoken about how hard it is to predict, but do you think it's going to be actually upset the sort of odds and become a high-scoring game, or is this going to be a one-goal affair?
I think it's more likely to be a couple of goals for Middlesbrough and a pretty comfortable win for them, to be honest. If you look at the Sheffield Wednesday game from a little while ago that we had, Josh Lukai, I think, had struggled to score goals in his first couple of games with Sheffield Wednesday. He's also a notoriously defensive manager, but if you get a few games into a manager's time at a club and they're struggling for goals and they have a pretty bad side come into their patch, then it's their opportunity to get forward and get some goals and put on a show for their home fans. And I expect Middlesbrough to do something similar and beat us probably 2 or 3-0, to be quite honest.
I think I'm going to go for 1-0 Middlesbrough myself. I can see this being a game that perhaps we have a couple of chances later on. The only problem is with saying 1-0 is that the way that we're playing at the moment, certainly it's happened at Bristol City, it happened against Birmingham, it happened against Millwall. When we go 1-0 down, we do kind of lose our heads a little bit, and we do kind of lose that last final bit of the game. And Middlesbrough and Wolves are other teams that have beaten us 2-0 this season. So I'm hesitantly going to say 1-0, knowing full well that the second goal, if it does come, will be almost inevitable, as it does. The prediction league, then, let's just give a little bit of an update, because I haven't really spoken about it too much over the last few weeks. Everybody got it wrong for Millwall. Nobody said we were going to lose. We had one draw in the mix and a bunch of wins, so it's still the case that Tom Crocker is well ahead of Dan Wimbush, who is in second. Then it's the rest of us clinging on and scrabbling around with very little success. Interestingly enough, the whole prediction league thing, at the moment I'm keeping tabs on how many points we would have if we were all correct. So, as I say, Tom Crocker is ahead in the prediction league, but he's actually predicted that we would win 52 points by this stage. He's been by far the most optimistic. 52 points buys you 5th place, which I think is a bit of an interesting one when it comes to its predictions for Reading. Maybe optimism does just kind of buy you the right way. And Johnny, who's been the most pessimistic of us, has predicted that we'd have got 35 points by this stage. The actual is 32 points. So I'm going to go for the 1-0 defeat. And let's end on Stam then. He is kind of hanging by the thread. Sim, do you think that Middlesbrough defeat, obviously a large defeat or a defeat by a number of goals might change things, but do you think a 1-0 or 2-0 defeat might be enough to tip him over the edge and see the sacking commence?
No, to be honest, we've gone through some very bad games in the last couple of months. So really, for him to get sacked after the Middlesbrough game, we have to be learning something more from the game. We'd have to be really aware that we've reached a particularly bad moment with the club, and I can't see that happening against Middlesbrough, to be honest. I don't think we're going to get beaten 4-5-6-0. I look at that game that Nigel Adkins had in his last game, getting thrashed 6-1 at Birmingham, and there was a very clear sense that things had got catastrophically bad in that last game, and I can't see that real sort of monumentally bad game coming under Stam. It just seems to be kind of just poor every week, not atrocious, not in a kind of a losing 5-6-0 kind of way that really brings the curtain down on a manager's spell. It's just relentlessly poor all the time. So I can't see that one big bad game coming against Middlesbrough, to be honest.
No, I must agree. It is just getting into that stage of just kind of wondering if not the Birmingham game, if not the Millwall games as such, why then? Why now? And that is going to be the question that is going to really have to linger for if the club owners do decide that after Middlesbrough might be the time to do it. It will be a case of just saying, well, what is it about this particular moment that has caused you to pull the trigger? And that's why I still think that we'll be seeing Jaap Stam at Reading for a decent amount of time to come, unless things do get particularly bad. As always, keep an eye on the Tilehurst End for the news and the reviews and the ratings and reaction. Are you doing the ratings this weekend, Sim, given that you are going up to Middlesbrough?
I believe it's Jack Simpson, our roving reporter, who's done a couple of away games this season.
Excellent. Well, those will be up on the site hopefully on Saturday evening or Sunday morning for you. And that leaves it there then for the Tilehurst End podcast this week. Thank you very much for joining me, Mr. BucksRoyal.
That's quite all right. Good evening.
And thank you all of you at home for joining us. And thank you, of course, for those who continue to contribute to the Patreon campaign. It does get a little bit tough for listening for all these podcasts and going through all the things at Reading Football Club at the moment, because it is, as Sim says, it's just kind of right in the middle of being annoying and infuriating. It's right in the sort of dull zone at the moment, but hopefully we will find salvation soon enough, and who knows, maybe that'll come away to Middlesbrough on Saturday. Come on, you arse.
You smile, funny how the crimes always leave a trail, even when it seems on